Hello there, I'm Begalius. Boo! Are you scared? I get it. You're scared. I'm British. Makes sense. I'm a huge Dead Space fan. I'm a massive Dead Space fan. More so than you would probably imagine. It's actually one of my favorite series of all time. Dead Space 2 is quite possibly my favorite horror game of all time. I absolutely adore that franchise, and I've been desperate for a true successor to that series, kind of a true successor to Dead Space 2, because they kind of dropped the ball with the atmosphere of Dead Space 3. And so when I heard that the developers were moving on to this game and they were trying to make some of the developers were trying to make a spiritual successor to Dead Space in the Callisto Protocol, I was very excited. I really wanted to jump into this game and see what they've done and see how they've sort of reinvented but continued the series. And then when I found out that they completely dropped the ball and that the game is a snooze fest and terrible from the opinion of the people who played it, then I was very, very disappointed. And I decided not to bother with it until I bought it the other day to actually give it a shot. And then literally 2 days later, they announced that they're adding it to Game Pass. But yeah, so I bought this game that everyone said was terrible. Did I have an awful time? Absolutely not. This is not a terrible game. Is it to the standard of Dead Space? No, I don't think it's up to the level of Dead Space. I don't think they've managed to create a spiritual successor here. But I still think they've managed to create a pretty decent game, and definitely one that I think is worth downloading on Game Pass and having a go through here. So I do understand why people have an issue with the game. I do understand where this issue stems. This kind of suffers from a similar issue to Hellblade 2, where it's tremendously cinematic. I mean, look at it straight off the bat. You know, if this game wants marks, then it's getting it from its visuals. This game is absolutely stunning. It is so beautiful to look at, and so organically beautiful as well. Everything here is cinematic, but it never feels forced. It feels as though the environment and the atmosphere that you're in, traversing through, experiencing explosions within, all of that is happening organically and is just beautiful and really, really well presented. And that's pretty much undeniable, but like I said, it kind of suffers with the Hellblade 2 syndrome, where yeah, it looks absolutely beautiful, but at the detriment of gameplay. Gameplay isn't a big, heavy emphasis here. However, here, the difference is that it kind of tries to be. Obviously, Visceral back in the day were known for not only the brilliant atmosphere of Dead Space, but for this dismemberment gameplay style where back in, I think it was 2008, every game worked in the same way, where it's like you get a headshot, and that's an instant kill, and you shoot anywhere else, you shoot on like the body, and you need a few more bullets, blah, 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 blah. But with Dead Space, it was about dismembering the limbs of the enemies, and it mixed up the gameplay, created something different, something refreshing. And I feel as though they've tried to do that here again with the combat, and it just hasn't landed. It just feels as though, with the dismemberment idea, it worked because it worked in terms of gameplay and like creating a fresh style of gameplay, and it wasn't just to service something else. Whereas here, the combat, this new combat style that they've invented, seems to exist more to facilitate a cinematic style of gameplay than to be refreshing and interesting. And even if that's not what they were going for, even if they didn't say, look, we need something that will maintain the cinematic style, it still feels that way. And that's an issue for me. So essentially the way that it works is once you enter combat, and that's another issue, it doesn't feel overly organic. You kind of get locked into combat straight away in a way that I think the devs thought was very organic, but just really isn't. So once you enter an encounter, you get locked into this sort of combat zone, and then when an enemy swings for you, you have to use the movement stick in the direction that they're swinging in order to dodge it. And then you can melee back with an attack. Now, it's more organic than it might sound from the way that I'm saying it. And I will say, when I heard about this gameplay, I thought, God, I'm not going to get through this game because that is going to be tremendously painful. It's not it's definitely doable, it's definitely workable and malleable, and it's honestly fine. And sometimes it's pretty cool. I will say that there's moments where you get to like smash an enemy up against the wall while you're doing it, and it works with the environments very organically. But I just don't think it's all that effective. I also think that like having melee combat that happens as much as this, where like there's as many hits involved, as many back and forths involved, I think this really diminishes the power of the atmosphere of this game. And I think that's actually probably the biggest issue with the game, and something that people don't realize, aside for the overall lack of gameplay. This like fist fight style of gameplay, I think, kind of retracts from the atmosphere in a way. There's a lot to be said for combat where you don't have much health, but neither does your enemy, and so going into the encounter, it's a hit for hit, and everything's on the line, right? Like you're either going to take that enemy down, or you're going to be taken down, or you're going to lose a huge chunk of health if you don't do it right. But if you do it right, then that enemy goes down straight away, and that really adds to the atmosphere. This hit for hit style just makes it feel more like an adventure game than anything else, but it does feel like a good one. It feels like a good adventure game, and I will say that I really enjoy the way that this game sort of progresses. It's a difficult thing to explain, but it's something that I like when it's done well, which is when a game just sort of throws you in, and you don't feel as though you're going from mission to mission. You feel as though you're just progressing from the start line to the finishing line, and there's a great sense of that here, and I like that a lot. I like how consistent the cinematics are with the gameplay. The shooting, however, I'm not a huge fan of. I can't believe these are the people who did Dead Space, because the shooting is better in Dead Space, so that's kind of mind-blowing to me. The story feels quite derivative. I don't really think there's enough here that sort of reinvents anything or does anything particularly interesting for me to kind of get excited over the story. I don't like the characters at all. I just don't like the characters in the story. And so ultimately the story didn't really grab me all that much, but I just think overall as like a cinematic package, I need to stop using the term package, overall as a cinematic package, I think this game does a lot right. And I definitely think that like if you're able to pick this up in the sale, or in the case of Game Pass, it's kind of perfect. I managed to grab this game from a CEX for £5. That is excellent, and I definitely think it's worth more than £5. I would put more of a like 15 or so price tag on it, because you do get a solid 8-hour adventure, and I do think there are some things that are great, and you can upgrade your weapons, which is pretty cool, and like I said, the sense of progress and the cinematic feel is really great here. So for all of its flaws, I definitely think that this is a game that's worth playing. So let's give it a score. So yeah, I think that's fair. I think maybe people might think it's a little too high, but I enjoyed myself here, and I'll see everyone later.
The PlayStation is only $149, and you can also get leading titles.